The Kashari Nova Academy occupied 3 orbital rings around a neutron star, which was either poetic symbolism for forging warriors in extreme conditions or catastrophically poor real estate planning. Kyle Voss suspected the latter, but kept this opinion to himself as he reviewed the incoming roster on his datapad. "They put a human in our cohort," announced Threx, his mandibles clicking with what passed for laughter among the Zinthari. "Candidate 847, species, Homo sapiens, homeworld, Sol 3, colloquially Earth." The common room fell silent for exactly 2 seconds before erupting in a cacophony of disbelief across 17 different vocal ranges. "Which administrator lost that bet?" muttered Senna, her chromatic scales shifting to an amused violet. The Korvashi had a particular talent for sensing political maneuvering, and her color palette rarely lied. Kyle Voss pulled up the Confederate database entry on his own screen. Earth. Admitted to the Confederacy 42 years prior after achieving faster-than-light capability through what the report diplomatically termed unorthodox methodology. Their planet sat in an unremarkable spiral arm of an unremarkable galaxy, notable only for having achieved spaceflight despite possessing technology that, according to Confederate engineers, shouldn't have functioned at all. "Cultural exchange program," read Mora, the Velian's optical clusters scanning multiple screens simultaneously. "It's a diplomatic courtesy. Their species has been lobbying for full military integration." "Military integration?" Threx's laughter intensified. "They've been spacefaring for less than a century. My grandmother's meditation cushion has seen more stellar conflicts." Kyle Voss had to concede the point. The Academy drew from species with military traditions spanning millennia. The Vremnok alone had been perfecting warfare when Earth's dominant life forms were still aquatic. Bringing a human here made as much sense as inviting a juvenile to a strategic command session. Technically possible, but why bother? "Did you access their atmospheric composition?" asked Senna, her scales flickering with genuine curiosity now. "Nitrogen-oxygen mix, but look at the ratios. And the gravity. It's nearly 0.9 Confederate standard." "So they're slightly heavier worlders," Kyle Voss shrugged. "The Braxes come from 1.4 and they're not exactly dominating the combat simulations." "No, but look at the stellar classification. G-type main sequence. Do you know what that means for radiation exposure?" "That they evolved under a particularly aggressive star?" Mora suggested. "That explains the melanin variations in their dermis, but not—" Senna paused, her colors shifting to a confused amber. "Wait. Most of their evolutionary records are restricted. Why would biological history be classified?" Before anyone could speculate, the entrance portal dilated, and their drill instructor entered. Senior Combat Architect Vorin was a Vremnok, which meant he stood 3 meters tall, possessed 4 articulated combat limbs, and had personally witnessed the burning of Kelthaz, an event that predated Confederate standard timekeeping. His carapace bore scars from weapons that hadn't been manufactured in 600 years. Every cadet straightened immediately. "You've seen the roster," Vorin stated, his vocoder translating Vremnok, clicking into flat Confederate standard. "You have questions. Irrelevant. Candidate 847 arrives at 0600 tomorrow. You will extend proper Academy courtesy." "Sir," Kyle Voss spoke carefully, "with respect, is the human qualified for standard training protocols?" "The physical requirements alone." "The human," Vorin interrupted, and something in his tone made Kyle Voss's tertiary lungs constrict. "Exceeded every preliminary assessment. She holds the 3rd highest entrance examination score in Academy history." The room processed this information with varying degrees of disbelief. "3rd?" Threx's mandibles had stopped clicking entirely. "The examination requires advanced astrophysics, strategic analysis across 14 known warfare doctrines, and a physical. I am aware of the examination requirements. Voron's vocoder somehow conveyed absolute finality. Having designed them, Senna's scales had gone completely neutral, the Korvashi equivalent of a poker face. Sir, if I may ask, who holds first and second? Classified. Voron's multiple eyes fixed on each cadet in sequence. Your first training module begins 0800 tomorrow. Survival protocols, specifically predator evasion. I suggest you review the theoretical frameworks tonight. He turned to leave, then paused at the portal. A word of advice. Do not underestimate candidate 847 based on preconceptions about her species. The Confederacy has underestimated humans exactly once. His scarred carapace gleamed under the station's artificial lighting. We are still calculating the ramifications. The portal sealed behind him, leaving 15 cadets in profound silence. What in the burning void does that mean? Whispered Threx. Kael'vos was already pulling up Confederate incident reports, searching for any military engagement involving Earth or its representatives. The database returned surprisingly few results, mostly diplomatic negotiations, a handful of trade disputes, one peculiar incident involving a human merchant vessel, and a Kelvorian pirate fleet that ended with the pirates requesting Confederate protection. From the humans. Found something, Mora announced, her optical clusters focusing intently on her screen. 23 years ago. First contact diplomatic reception. Human delegation toured the Confederate Arsenal Museum. When they reached the historical weapons exhibit, specifically the Devourers of Kel'Thas, the human ambassador apparently laughed. Laughed? Senna's scales rippled with confusion. At weapons that rendered 3 systems uninhabitable? According to the report, she said, Mora's translation implant struggled with the phrasing, we used to make these for our children. The room absorbed this statement. That has to be a translation error, Kael'vos said firmly. No species arms their juveniles with system-killing weaponry. The report was filed by Ambassador Velcourt himself. He doesn't make translation errors. Mora's clusters dimmed slightly. He also requested increased security measures for all future human interactions. Request was denied as diplomatically inappropriate. Threx had gone very still, a sign of deep contemplation among his species. Pull up Earth's Confederate application records, their military capacity assessment. Mora complied, then froze. It's incomplete. Sections are redacted, but what's here? She trailed off, colors shifting rapidly across her visual spectrum, the Velian equivalent of confusion bordering on disbelief. What? Pressed Senna. Their military doctrine section. It's a single line. Comprehensive evaluation pending. Preliminary assessment. Inadvisable. Inadvisable to evaluate? Kael'vos felt his tertiary lungs constricting again. What kind of military is inadvisable to assess? No one had an answer. They spent the next 3 hours searching databases, finding only fragments. Earth's biosphere reports were corrupted. Their military history was classified above their security clearance, and every detailed analysis seemed to dead end in bureaucratic restrictions or missing files. At 6 a.m. the next morning, they assembled in the training atrium. Candidate 847 arrived precisely on time, wearing standard academy utilities that somehow looked less formal on her bipedal frame. She was smaller than Kael'vos, built along what the database called average for her species, which placed her below average height for academy standards. She had brown skin, dark hair pulled into a functional knot, and eyes that moved constantly, cataloging everything with unsettling focus. When she smiled, a human expression indicating friendliness, supposedly, it didn't quite reach those eyes. Good morning, she said, her voice utilizing the same tonal range as most Confederate species. "I'm looking forward to training with you." Threx, never one for subtlety, clicked out. "Try not to slow us down, Charity Case." Her smile widened fractionally. "I'll do my best." At 0800, they entered the simulation chamber. Vorin stood at the control platform, his carapace gleaming under harsh lighting. "Survival protocols," he announced. "Predator evasion. You will be placed in a hostile environment containing a Class 7 apex predator. Your objective? Survive for 15 minutes using evasion tactics only. No weapons, no combat engagement." The simulation initialized. A dense forest environment with bioluminescent vegetation and 3 moons visible through the canopy. Beautiful, until the detection alerts began screaming. The predator materialized 200 meters away. Class 7 meant it. Stood 4 meters tall, possessed sensory organs capable of detecting electromagnetic signatures, and had been responsible for rendering its homeworld uninhabitable before the Confederacy glassed the entire system as a containment measure. Kyle Voss ran. They all ran, scattering according to training, except Candidate 847. She stood motionless, head tilted, watching the creature approach with what appeared to be academic interest. "Move!" Vorin's voice boomed through the simulation. She glanced up at the observation platform, then back at the predator, and pulled out a datapad. She was taking notes. The predator moved like liquid shadow through the simulation forest, its 6 limbs carrying 4 tons of apex evolution with disturbing grace. Kyle Voss watched from behind a crystalline outcropping as the creature's sensory tendrils swept the area, tasting electromagnetic fields the way his species tasted air. Candidate 847 had shifted positions, not fleeing, but circling, observing angles. Her datapad stylus moved in quick, efficient strokes. "What is she doing?" hissed Senna from somewhere in the canopy above. Her chromatic scales had locked into pure survival mode gray, rendering her nearly invisible against the bark. The human crouched, examining a depression in the simulated soil where the predator's anterior limb had pressed down. She measured it with her hands, then made another notation. "Vorin!" Threx's voice crackled through the comm system, pitched high with panic. "Terminate the exercise." She's going to get herself killed. The simulation registers actual neurological trauma if... "Observation," Vorin interrupted, his tone carrying an edge that Kael'vas had never heard before. "Continue." The predator had noticed her now. Its primary sensory cluster swiveled, locking onto the human's bioelectric signature. The simulation's environmental processors kicked in. Temperature dropped 3 degrees as the creature's hunting physiology activated. In the wild, this thing had evolved to pursue prey across continental distances. The 15-minute survival window wasn't generous. It was mathematically calculated based on average Confederate species' maximum sprint duration. Candidate 847 looked up from her datapad, met the predator's approximation of eyes, and smiled. Not the polite greeting smile from earlier. This expression contained teeth. The creature lunged, 4 tons of muscle and chitin covering 40 meters in 3 seconds. The human moved, not away. Perpendicular. She dropped her datapad, ducked under the first strike, and rolled toward a cluster of bioluminescent fungi that released spores when disturbed. The predator's momentum carried it through the cloud, its sensory tendrils retracting instinctively from the irritant. 13 minutes remained. "She's studying its attack patterns," Mora breathed from her position wedged between 2 massive roots. "Look at her positioning. She's forcing it to reveal its full range of motion. That's insane," Kyle Voss countered, though he couldn't look away. "You don't study a Class 7 predator. You run until your cardiovascular system fails, then you die." "Humans don't have redundant cardiovascular systems," Senna noted, her scales flickering with confused orange. Single heart, single respiratory pathway? How is she maintaining that movement speed? The predator adapted, as Class 7 organisms inevitably did. It began herding her, using terrain to limit her options, driving her toward a cliff face that would eliminate her mobility advantage. The simulation's tactical overlay showed the strategy clearly. She had perhaps 30 seconds before the trap closed. Candidate 847 saw it, too. Instead of changing direction, she accelerated toward the cliff. She's panicking, Threx decided. Finally realized. She hit the cliff at full sprint and went up. Her hands found holds that Kael'vos's superior vision hadn't registered. Feet found purchase on surfaces that shouldn't have supported her mass. She climbed with a fluid efficiency that suggested she'd done this before, frequently, under less controlled circumstances. The predator couldn't follow. Its mass and limb structure made vertical surfaces impossible. It circled below, tendrils questing upward, finding nothing. Arboreal adaptation, Mora whispered. But Earth's database doesn't list humans as arboreal specialists. They're classified as persistence hunters, whatever that means. 10 minutes. The human sat on a ledge 8 meters up, breathing hard but controlled. She'd retrieved her datapad somehow. Kael'vos must have missed it, and was sketching the predator's skeletal structure based on movement analysis. Voron's voice cut through the simulation. Candidate 847. The exercise objective is evasion, not reconnaissance. Yes, sir. She didn't stop drawing. I'm evading very successfully. Sir. Something that might have been amusement rippled through Voron's vocoder translation. The predator began ramming the cliff face. Simulated rock fractured. The human's ledge trembled. She measured the distance to the next stable surface with her eyes, then looked down at the predator's timing between strikes. Calculating, when the creature pulled back for another impact, she dropped, not fell. Dropped with purpose, landing on the predator's dorsal carapace. What? Multiple voices started simultaneously. She used the creature's own momentum from its next ram to launch herself across a gap that should have been impossible. Tucked, rolled, came up running on the opposite side of a ravine the predator would need 3 minutes to navigate around. 7 minutes. That's not evasion, Kael'vos stated flatly. That's tactical exploitation. That's insane, Senna corrected. Her scales stuck between impressed gold and terrified white, creating a nauseating strobe effect. The human found a hollowed tree, squeezed inside, and finally stopped moving. Her breathing regulated within seconds. The data pad indicated her heart rate dropping from exertion levels to merely elevated alertness. The predator searched. Its electromagnetic sense swept the area repeatedly, but the tree's composition created interference. The simulation's timer counted down. 4 minutes. Candidate 847 pulled out a ration bar and ate it. Casually, like she was having lunch in the academy commissary instead of hiding inside a tree from a creature that had depopulated planets. 2 minutes. The predator moved away, seeking easier prey. It had detected Mora's hiding spot and began excavating the root system with methodical precision. Candidate 847's head emerged from the hollow. She assessed Mora's situation, looked at the timer, then did something that made Kael'vos's tertiary lungs seize entirely. She picked up a rock and threw it. The impact against the predator's rear sensory cluster wasn't damaging, but it was insulting. The creature abandoned Mora instantly, spinning toward this new threat with what could only be described as rage. She just saved Mora, Threx said, disbelief saturating every syllable, by making herself bait. 60 seconds. The human ran again, not panic sprint but measured pace, keeping exactly far enough ahead to maintain the predator's interest but prevent actual contact. She was herding it now, leading it away from the other cadets' positions. 30 seconds. The predator's strike came within centimeters. She dove, rolled, came up with her back against another cliff face. Nowhere to run. The creature's maw opened, revealing the bioacid reservoirs that made Class 7 organisms worthy of planetary containment protocols. 15 seconds. Candidate 847 raised both hands, palms forward. A human gesture the database listed as surrender. Then she winked. The simulation terminated. The forest dissolved into the training chamber's bare walls. The predator vanished mid-lunge. Silence consumed the space where 16 cadets stood catching their breath. 15 of them were scattered across the chamber in various states of distress. One stood exactly where the simulation had ended, hands still raised, wearing an expression of profound satisfaction. Vorin descended from the observation platform, his 4 limbs carrying him with ominous deliberation. He stopped 2 meters from Candidate 847, towering over her significantly smaller frame. "Your mission," he stated, "was evasion, not analysis, not rescue, not engagement." "Yes, sir. I evaded for 15 minutes. "Sir, you took unnecessary risks." "Calculated risks, sir. There's a difference." Voron's vocoder emitted a sound the translation matrix couldn't process. Finally, "What did you learn?" She consulted her datapad. The creature's sensory tendrils retract at wind speeds above 15 meters per second. Its electromagnetic detection has a 40-degree blind spot in the dorsal posterior quadrant. The bioacid has a preparation time of approximately 2.3 seconds before discharge, indicated by bioluminescent activation in the throat cavity, exploitable in close-quarters combat, though inadvisable without proper equipment. "You determined all this during a survival exercise?" "Yes, sir." A pause. "In my defense, sir, where I'm from, we'd classify that as a Class 4 predator, maybe Class 5 on a bad day." Every cadet stared at her. "Class 4, Senna repeated slowly, her scales unable to settle on any single color. "You're saying Earth has worse?" Candidate 847's expression shifted to something that might have been confusion. "Well, yes. That thing was only 4 meters tall and entirely terrestrial. It didn't even have venom or pack-hunting behaviors. Back home we've got—" She stopped, noticing the expressions around her. "Sorry, is that not normal?" Voron's vocoder made that untranslatable sound again. Kael'vos pulled out his datapad with trembling appendages and began searching Confederate databases with new parameters. Species classification, predator categorization, Earth. The fragments he found made his tertiary lungs stop functioning entirely. Kael'vos's quarters had become an impromptu research laboratory by 0200 hours. 6 cadets crowded around his central display unit, cross-referencing fragmented data files that Confederate bureaucracy had apparently tried very hard to bury. "This cannot be accurate," Mora stated, though her optical clusters remained fixed on the screen. "The translation matrix must have corrupted during data transfer." "I ran it through 4 separate linguistic verification protocols," Kael'vos countered. "The translations are consistent." Threx leaned closer, his mandibles working silently as he processed information. "Read that section again, the part about their extinct megafauna." Kael'vos cleared his throat. "Earth fossil records indicate dominant predator species reaching 20 meters in length, possessing bite forces exceeding—" He paused, recalculated. "No, that's correct. Exceeding 60,000 newtons. For context, a Vremnok's combat mandibles generate approximately 12,000. "Extinct, though," Senna offered, her scales pulsing hopefully. "These creatures don't exist anymore, correct?" "Correct. They were replaced by smaller, more efficient apex predators." Kael'vos switched files. "Current Earth fauna includes aquatic predators reaching 8 meters with serrated dental arrays and electroreception capabilities, terrestrial ambush predators possessing retractable claws and bite force sufficient to crush reinforced bone, pack hunters with endurance pursuit capabilities and complex tactical communication. That's just standard planetary evolution, Threx protested. Lots of worlds have... On a single planet, Kyle Voss interrupted. All of these, on one planet, simultaneously, across multiple environmental zones. The silence stretched. Continue, Mora whispered. There are organisms that kill using neurotoxins, others using constructed traps, several species that hunt cooperatively across family units. He scrolled faster. Here's a particularly interesting entry. 8-limbed invertebrates demonstrating problem-solving abilities that qualify them for sapience consideration under Confederate law, except they're classified as food source on Earth. Senna's scales had gone completely white. They eat potential sapients? The note suggests humans consider them a delicacy. Kael'Vos felt his translator struggle with the next section. There's an entire category of Earth organisms called megafauna that humans apparently hunt for recreation. Recreation, Threx repeated flatly. Not sustenance. Not territorial defense. For fun. According to this file, heavily redacted, mind you, humans engage in something called persistence hunting. They identify a prey animal with superior speed, strength, and natural weaponry, then chase it continuously until the creature's physiology fails from exhaustion. Humans possess inferior cooling systems that allow them to maintain activity during temperature extremes that would kill most other species. That's impossible, Mora stated. No predator wastes that much energy. It's metabolically unsustainable. Unless, Senna said slowly, they evolved in an environment where wasting energy was necessary for survival. Kael'Vos pulled up another file, this one barely salvaged from corrupted archives. Earth atmospheric composition includes oxygen levels that are technically toxic to most Confederate species. Their star emits radiation classified as hazardous without proper shielding. The planet experiences regular catastrophic weather events, hurricanes, tornadoes, tsunamis, that humans simply endure. There's a note here about them engaging in recreational activities during storms. What kind of recreational activities? Threx asked. Something called surfing. Kael'Vos displayed an image file that had somehow survived the corruption. It showed a human standing on a primitive board, riding a wave that towered 15 meters high, grinning. They stared at the image. They're insane, Senna declared, her scales flashing between colors too rapidly to track. Their entire species is clinically insane. Or perfectly adapted to a planet that actively tries to kill them, Mora countered. Look at their medical data. The uncorrupted portions. Their pain tolerance is classified as exceptional. They possess an immune response capable of fighting off pathogens that would liquefy most Confederate species. Their skeletal structure can survive impacts that would shatter Corvashi crystalline matrices. Kael'Vos switched to military records. Here's something from the pirate incident. Remember, Kelvorian raiders attacked a human merchant vessel. The one where the pirates requested Confederate protection afterward, Threx recalled. The after-action report was sealed, but I found a fragment. Kael'Vos read carefully. Human crew, consisting of 3 individuals, responded to boarding action with improvised weapons. Kelvorian casualties, 17 dead, 34 incapacitated, psychological trauma requiring extended rehabilitation for all survivors. Human casualties, minor lacerations, 1 fractured hand. Human captain's official statement. They started it. The room processed this information. 3 humans, Mora said, against 51 Kelvorian pirates, trained warriors. The fragment includes a note from the Confederate investigator. Kael'vos's voice had gone quiet. It says, "Recommend avoiding military confrontation with human species. Their capacity for violence, while typically suppressed by social conditioning, appears functionally limitless when activated. They do not possess standard predator inhibition responses." "What does that mean?" Senna asked. "Predator inhibition responses?" "Most species," Kael'vos explained, "possess instinctive limitations on violence. We stop when threat neutralization is achieved. We have biological mechanisms that prevent unnecessary destruction of our own kind." He paused. "Humans apparently evolved without these mechanisms. They can override survival instincts through sheer cognitive determination." Threx had gone very still again. "Pull up the Academy entrance examination results. All of them." Mora complied, her clusters scanning the data. Vorin said Candidate 847 ranked third. First and second are classified, but... She froze. The examination date for the top score. "It's 41 years ago. Right after Earth joined the Confederacy," Kael'vos realized. "Check the second place score." Threx's voice carried certainty now. 40 years ago. Mora's colors dimmed. "Both top scores are humans. They sent their best first to evaluate our standards, and they've been holding back ever since." The implications settled over them like a gravitational field. "Candidate 847 isn't their best," Senna whispered, her scales locked in horrified silver. "She's average." "They sent us an average human." A chime interrupted their spiral into existential dread. "Morning briefing in 20 minutes. They arrived at the assembly hall to find General Kresic waiting alongside Vorin. Kresic was Thalorian, a species renowned for strategic thinking and possessed of a lifespan measured in centuries. She had overseen Confederate military operations for 63 years. "You researched them," Kresic stated without preamble, her crystalline voice carrying perfect clarity. "The human. You found the restricted files." It wasn't a question. "Sir," Kael'vos began, "we were attempting to understand why we accepted a primitive species into our military structure. Kresic's optical array swept across them. Why we permitted humans access to Confederate tactical databases. Why we treat them as equals despite their brief spacefaring history." She gestured, and a holographic display activated. It showed Earth, blue and green and swirling white, hanging in the void like a jewel. "That planet," Kresic said, quietly, "has survived 5 mass extinction events, asteroidal impacts, volcanic winters, ice ages. Its dominant species, humans, evolved by outlasting everything that tried to kill them. They learned to hunt creatures stronger, faster, and better armed. They developed persistence that borders on supernatural. They turned their planet's hostility into weaponized adaptation." The hologram shifted, showing historical human warfare. Primitive projectile weapons, chemical explosives, nuclear fission. "They fought each other," Kresic continued, "with escalating lethality for thousands of years. They developed strategy, tactics, and weaponry that made Confederate observers request psychological evaluation. Then, 42 years ago, they turned that collective experience outward and achieved faster-than-light travel using mathematics that shouldn't work, but somehow does." She deactivated the display. "You want to know why Candidate 847 seems unaffected by training protocols designed to break elite warriors? Because compared to surviving Earth, this academy is vacation." Kresic's voice carried something that might have been respect, or possibly fear. "You asked Vorin why she seems different. I'll tell you, she isn't different. She's exactly what evolution creates when a planet spends 4 billion years trying to kill everything on it, and one species responds by refusing to die." "Sir," Threx managed, "what are we supposed to do with that information?" Kresic's expression, if Thalorian facial structures could convey such things, looked almost sympathetic. Pray you never see what humans are capable of when they stop being polite. The assembly hall's displays flickered to life, showing the day's training schedule. Combat fundamentals, unarmed engagement, 0900 hours. Kyle Voss felt his tertiary lungs constrict for what seemed like the 100th time since Candidate 847 arrived. This was going to be educational. The Combat Fundamentals arena utilized adaptive holographic technology that generated opponents calibrated precisely to each species' capabilities, strong enough to challenge, controlled enough to prevent actual injury. Theoretically, Threx went first, facing a simulation of a Zinthari warrior at peak physical condition. The match lasted 4 minutes of respectable technique before Threx's opponent executed a mandible lock that ended the exercise. Honorable performance. Textbook execution. Senna followed, her chromatic advantages allowing tactical deception that worked beautifully until the simulated Korvashi opponent adapted to her pattern shifts. She yielded gracefully at 6 minutes. Mora's multiple optical clusters provided simultaneous threat assessment, but even that advantage couldn't compensate when facing a Velian opponent with identical sensory capabilities. 3 minutes. Clean defeat. Kyle Voss managed 5 minutes through superior reach and his species' natural respiratory redundancy. Still lost. Candidate 847 watched each match with that unsettling focus, occasionally making notes, more often simply observing with eyes that tracked movement patterns like targeting systems. Candidate 847, Vorin announced. Your final. She stepped onto the platform, wearing standard Academy combat utilities that somehow looked inadequate on her smaller frame. The system initialized, running its calibration sequence. Then the alerts began. Error, the automated system announced in flat Confederate standard. Unable to generate appropriate match parameters. Species database incomplete, defaulting to estimated capabilities based on available data. The hologram materialized opposite her. It looked vaguely humanoid. 2 arms, 2 legs, bipedal stance, but the proportions were wrong. Too tall, too heavily muscled. It moved with mechanical precision that no organic being could match. Sir, Candidate 847 addressed Vorin calmly. I think your system miscalculated. How so? Vorin's vocoder remained neutral. That thing massing about 90 kilograms more than human average. And those joint configurations would allow striking force beyond... She paused, recalculating, significantly beyond normal parameters. The system, General Kresick interjected from her observation position, extrapolated from incomplete data. It attempted to generate an appropriate challenge. It generated something impossible, Candidate 847 countered. Humans don't have that muscle density without chemical enhancement, which is prohibited under Academy regulations. Then you should have no difficulty yielding, Kresick suggested. The human looked at the holographic opponent, then at Kresick, then back to the simulation. Something shifted in her expression. Not fear, but calculation of a different sort. She raised her hand, not in surrender, requesting permission. You want to continue, Vorin stated, if the general permits. Her voice carried absolute calm. I'm curious about the system's assumptions regarding human combat capability. Kresick's crystalline voice held dark amusement. Proceed. The hologram attacked immediately. No warm-up, no tactical probing. Pure aggression at maximum capability. Candidate 847 moved. Not the fluid evasion from the Predator exercise. This was different. Economical, precise, brutal in its efficiency. She slipped the first strike by centimeters, used the hologram's momentum against it, struck at joint vulnerabilities with targeted precision. The hologram adapted, as all Academy simulations did. It compensated for her speed, adjusted its attack patterns, increased aggression. She adapted faster. "Look at her breathing," Mora whispered. "It's not elevating. She's not even close to cardiovascular stress." The match continued. 2 minutes, 3. The hologram landed a strike that would have fractured Kyle Voss's exoskeleton. She absorbed it, twisted with the impact, converted defensive motion into offensive positioning. She's not trying to win, Senna realized, her scales flickering with comprehension. She's teaching it. Every exchange, she's showing it something new, waiting for it to adapt, then countering the adaptation. 4 minutes. 5. The hologram fought with capabilities beyond any organic being. She fought with something the Confederacy had apparently never properly categorized. The accumulated knowledge of a species that spent millennia perfecting violence against itself. 6 minutes. The hologram's programming began showing strain. It had exhausted its adaptive protocols, cycling through combinations that she'd already countered. She hadn't. 7 minutes. She moved inside its guard, executed a joint manipulation that shouldn't have worked on a holographic projection, but somehow did, and the simulation destabilized. The hologram flickered, reformed, attacked with renewed parameters. She smiled, that expression with teeth, and met it head-on. The system terminated at 9 minutes, not because either combatant yielded, but because the simulation had consumed its processing capacity, attempting to generate challenges for something it couldn't adequately model. Candidate 847 stood in the center of the platform, breathing slightly elevated now, a minor contusion forming on her left cheekbone, otherwise unmarked. The arena had gone absolutely silent. Vorin descended to the platform, his ancient carapace reflecting the overhead lighting. He stopped before her, towering as he had after the Predator exercise. "Your performance," he began, and Kyle Voss detected something in the vocoder translation he'd never heard before. "Exceeded all parameters." "Thank you, sir." She straightened, despite obvious fatigue. "Though I should note the system's assumptions about human capabilities remain significantly inaccurate." "How so?" "It assumed peak physical conditioning." Her expression carried dry humor. "Sir, I'm a mid-range academic recruit. I passed the physical requirements, but I'm not exceptional by human standards. If you want to see what we're actually capable of, you should probably request one of our specialists." Every cadet processed this statement with varying degrees of horror. "You're saying," Kresick spoke from her observation position, "that this performance represents average human capability. In terms of pure physicality, below average, honestly. I focused on tactical studies." She gestured at the now empty platform. "Our combat specialists train against each other, sir. They've spent generations developing techniques for fighting opponents with identical capabilities. Same strength, same speed, same endurance, same refusal to quit. That's a different kind of challenge than facing something stronger or faster. It requires understanding that your opponent thinks exactly like you do, wants to survive exactly as much as you do, and possesses identical determination to prevail." She paused, registering the expressions around her. "That's not normal either, is it?" Vorin's vocoder made that untranslatable sound again, longer this time. When he finally spoke, his translation carried something that might have been resignation. "Class dismissed. We reconvene tomorrow for advanced tactical scenarios." He fixed his multiple eyes on candidate 847. "For which we will be completely redesigning the parameters." The cadets filed out in stunned silence. Kyle Voss noticed General Kresick approaching Vorin, their conversation too quiet for his sensors to capture. But he caught fragments. Never should have accepted their application. Too late now. They're Confederate citizens. Military integration was supposed to be symbolic. Turned out they took it seriously. That evening, Kael'vas found himself back in his quarters, staring at his datapad. He'd pulled up the original Confederate contact report from 42 years ago, the first message Earth had transmitted upon achieving faster-than-light capability. It was brief. Just 3 words in multiple languages, translated into Confederate Standard. We are here. Not a request for contact, not a plea for acceptance, simply a statement of fact, delivered with the absolute certainty of a species that had spent 4 billion years proving they couldn't be killed, and had finally decided to introduce themselves to a galaxy that had no idea what was coming. Kael'vas thought about Candidate 847's smile, that expression with teeth that never quite reached her eyes. He thought about her casual dismissal of a Class 7 predator, her methodical dismantling of a combat simulation designed to break elite warriors. He thought about General Kressick's warning, "Pray you never see what humans are capable of when they stop being polite." And he realized, with a clarity that made his tertiary lungs constrict one final time, that the Confederacy hadn't accepted Earth into their military structure. Earth had simply informed them of a partnership they were going to accept. The rest was just paperwork. His datapad chimed with tomorrow's training schedule, advanced tactical scenarios, species-specific combat doctrine analysis. Kael'vas looked at Candidate 847's name on the roster and wondered what fresh horror she would reveal about her species tomorrow. Then he wondered if perhaps horror was the wrong word. Perhaps education was more accurate. The Confederacy was learning what humanity had known for millennia. Survival wasn't about being the strongest or fastest or best armed. It was about refusing to quit when everything else already had. And humans, apparently, had never learned how to quit. They'd just learned how to smile while they kept going.